If you've been training glutes for months and your butt still looks the same, it's almost never genetics. Genetics definitely play a part, but it's more than likely because you're making one or more of these 3 predictable mistakes. So in this video, I'm going to show you 3 real reasons why most women never see their glutes grow, men too, and plus exactly how to fix each of them with clear training and nutrition. Let's get into it. Most women that I have coached say the same thing. They train glutes 3 times per week, they feel the burn, but they never actually grow. Does that sound familiar? But the uncomfortable truth is that you can't feel the burn or activate your glutes into growth. You need hard training, sufficient volume, progressive overload, and enough food to actually build tissue. So let's break down the 3 main failure points I see over and over in real situations. Then I will give you a 12-week plan that you can screenshot and follow. So let's get to it. Reason number 1, you're not training hard enough, point blank. So intensity and overload. When I worked with women, I now work online, but when I worked with women in person, most of the time they are either fearful of going heavier because they're not sure, they're not quite good enough with form to go heavier. It can be many things that's going on in the brain of someone trying to achieve these things, but falling short, especially in not training hard enough. But the reason is simple. The sets are too easy and you are stopping far from failure and protecting comfort instead of progression. Even have probably caught myself not training hard enough. And mind you, there are times in your program where taking a step back, focusing on form, focusing on flow are definitely a priority. But if you've been doing that for the past 10 years, you probably want to shift gears a little bit. So with research and my coaching experience, both point in the same direction, that hypertrophy, muscle growth, happens when you spend enough sets within that 2 to 3 repetitions of true muscular failure several times per week. And so most people are doing 3 sets of 12 with a weight they could realistically do 20 reps with, and that's just junk volume. So if the weight that you have, if you can do, my rule is always 15. If I can do 15 or more, it's time clean, then it's time for me to consider moving up in weight. Typically with lower body, you can get away with a 5 to 10 pound jump. I tend to go like to 20 pound jumps on lower body, and these rules still would apply to other body parts. And so even with upper body, you also want to make sure that you're operating with the same kind of structure. So volume is not going to help you. It's going to tank your energy and your recovery and not really get much from it. And it's also really discouraging to put in a lot of effort and not see anything change. So you do want to push yourself. You obviously don't want to push yourself into injury. So be very mindful of your form, how you're executing, how long you've been doing this exercise, which modality you're using. Some modalities have the same job, but feel and function a little bit differently depending on someone's anatomy. And so those last 5 repetitions, your speed of the exercise slow down dramatically. Typically, your face will definitely show some effort, and the last 2 reps should feel pretty challenging to where you feel something's gonna give. Not that your form is going all crazy wonky, but something is gonna give if you continue going past those 2 repetitions. So it should feel like you only have a couple more in your tank at any given point. And so to fix this fix reason number 1, you want to pick 3 to 5 core glute exercises for the week and commit to training them hard. So hip thrusts or bridges, RDLs, glute-based split squats, and glute focus hyperextensions or back extensions. Those are all great options. And then for each main lift, you want to work in the 6 to 12 repetition range and push every set within 1 to 3 repetition to failure. So you would have 1 to 3 left before you failed. And if you finish your prescribed repetitions, say we're doing 12, and you feel like you have more than 5 reps left in your tank, then keep going or increase the load for the next session or the next set even. Sometimes if I'm still figuring out an exercise, I like to do ascending sets, which means maybe I'm doing dumbbell RDLs. I start with 50 pounds in each hand. That felt pretty easy. I might go to 60 in each hand for the next set until I find my sweet spot, which is usually going to be that third or fourth if it's a new exercise. So don't be afraid. And then also don't be afraid to be like, oh, that was really light. This is my warm-up set. And now I'll do my working sets. That could be warm-up, working sets, all that jazz can be for another video. Essentially, a warm-up set is something that you're using to warm up. Working set counts towards that, like sets of 12, whereas that one set would not count towards that. So definitely use something to log this information too. Notes app on an iPhone is perfect. You could do spreadsheets if that's your jam, and aim to add 1 to 2 reps or 2 to 5% of the load on most weeks. And then depends on how you are, but about every 4 for a beginner, 6 for intermediate, maybe like weeks for someone who's more advanced. You want to do a deload. Recovery is extremely important when it comes to muscle growth, especially if you're really pushing yourself hard. You want to have those seasons of your program to where you're not just going balls to the wall endlessly. You do want to have some time to let your muscles recover and ensure that you are providing it what it needs to do so. Cool, that was reason number 1. Reason number 2 is that you have poor exercise selection and execution. So maybe your quads or your hamstrings are hijacking the move for you. This is something I see a lot in hip thrusts, especially where they feel it in their quads. So that circles back to my idea of making sure that your form is good on these exercises so that you are executing them perfectly, or as close to perfect as you can get. You can definitely, I have a little handle in my way. Can definitely see growth as a beginner in some of these with still doing them a little haphazardly, but the more consistent that you get, these variables matter a lot. And so and conventional deadlifts are fine, but for many women, they grow quads and hams and not the glutes, especially with ego lifting and shallow ranges. So ego lifting tends to look a little bit different in women than it does in men. So I'll explain kind of what I see in both. With women, typically ego lifting looks like they don't want to go heavier. There are those cases, especially with things that are more supported like leg press, to where they put way too much and their range of motion is very shallow. That is a form of ego lifting. Another form of ego lifting is not going heavy enough out of the fear for making some funny faces, maybe not being able to do what you expected to be able to do, or just feeling embarrassed in general to try something new. That's all ego involvement. So be very mindful of what is holding you back. And if you don't feel comfortable enough to make that next step into forgetting those thoughts that you're having and just go for it, then baby stepping, finding what does work well for you. If you're really uncomfortable with a heavy squat because you don't want to ask for a spotter, then maybe focus on the leg press. And then if you're really uncomfortable with RDLs because of the position it puts you in at the gym, I always face my butt into the rack so that I'm not worried about what people are looking at my butthole behind me. As well as with hip thrusts, you can face a wall if you're uncomfortable, or now there's a lot of gyms that have the machines, and you can also just find the modality that works for you if you feel you're getting some of that ego involvement there. And for men, what it typically looks like is going way too heavy with terrible form. They can crank it out and it's decent, but you want to be mindful of good form, not only for hitting the target muscles, but also for injury prevention. And so making sure that you're operating within a range that you can complete the range of motion. And if you're not sure what the range of motion is for what you're trying to target, there's plenty of resources out there. And if there's anything that you guys want more information about, just leave a comment and I will definitely make a video about it. And then on top of that ego loading and the shallow motion, there are many steps that are performed in ranges where the glutes aren't under meaningful tension. And so you feel tired, but the target muscles never get stimulus. So you could have quad dominant squat instead on accident, which typically means like a high bar squat. You have a lot of forward knee travel, your torso is really upright, and so your quads are getting a lot of stimulus. And then with hip thrusts and glute bridges, if you control an eccentric with your pelvic bone tucked, then you can control it and feel the tension in that glute area more than the quads. If you're kind of swaying all over the place, you're not going to feel it. And that's why that control aspect of the repetitions you're performing is important. And I think that ties in also to making sure that your load is sufficient enough. If you don't have a heavy enough load, you're going to fly through those reps and probably feel it in whatever muscle is the strongest. If you're trying to work on your glutes, they may not be the strongest. Big glutes doesn't mean that they're strong either. So you might have good shape, but not have a lot of strength. And so keep that in mind. You want to feel it where you want to feel it. My pro tip is when you are warming up for an exercise, put on a really light weight, something that would be considered a warm up for you, or no weight at all, and focus on going as slow as you can and feel it exactly where you want to feel it. I love doing this with hip thrusts, and I'll do like 30 repetitions so I can really feel that mind muscle connection in the area I want to feel it in. And then I'll slowly start to add that weight so that I can find that sweet spot in the weight to where I'm feeling it a lot and it feels good and I'm feeling it where I want to feel it, but it's not like myself into a higher weight and not being able to feel it where I want to feel it anymore. So that is my pro tip. But some other fixes are your glute train around exercises that are easy to progress and heavily load the glutes. So barbell hip thrusts or glute bridges are great. Romanian deadlifts, RDLs, biased split squats. And how to make something glute bias is that you don't let your knee travel forward. You try to keep your knee, if this is my ankle and this is my knee, you try to keep your ankle and knee in a straight line rather than having your knee come forward and go past your ankle. So you want to keep them in a straight line. And if you do it like this, to where this is your ankle and this is your knee, then you're going to feel it a lot in your hamstrings, like your belly of your hamstring, rather than here where it's going to be focusing. It's going to be like a tabletop. These are my glutes, and you're going to be feeling it in the glutes because it's going to be the main lever for that exercise. And that goes for squats, lunges, step ups. If you keep that ankle and knee in a straight line, you're able to push through the midfoot a lot more, maybe a little emphasis on the heels, and you'll feel it a lot in the glutes. So pro tip there, alignment is key. And then use the rule of thirds concept over the week. So 1/3 movements, so hip thrusts, bridges, kickbacks, 1/3 vertical. And then RDLs and split squats would be the verticals. So that means standing upright. Horizontal would be back or your chest are sky and floor. And then 1/3 lateral or rotational. So abductions, band walks, fire hydrants. So you're hitting the glute max, the glute med, and the glute min, whatever. And then stay in your active range of motion. So only go as deep as you can while keeping tension in the glutes instead of chasing depth that might shift work to other muscles or your lower back. Azula. This is Azula. Okay. You want to keep it where you feel the tension. So ass to grass squat, you like me, I'll lose tension in my glutes the closer I get to the bottom. But if I stop just short of full ass to grass, I feel the tension a lot more and it works a lot better for me. So find your sweet spot. You have to be very aware of your body. And then you want to start each session with low load glute activation, like I mentioned earlier. So you could do some abductions with the band, some body weight bridges, lightweight bridges, clamshells. You could start with your kickbacks or your hamstring curls. You want to do something to bias the glutes and reduce the takeover once you load up. So for me, I really like starting with some band walks. I go side to side, I go forward and back, then I do some clamshells, and I might even just start with some hip thrusts with a really light weight and do that like the 30 repetitions I mentioned earlier. So that's the fix. The third and last reason, there's many other things that could definitely be variables here, but these are the ones I see the most. So number 3 is that your nutrition and your frequency do not match your goal. So you're trying to build glutes in a calorie deficit with insufficient protein and low training frequency. That's definitely a cutting plan, not a building plan. And it's really difficult. I don't want to undermine that. It's difficult to shift into muscle building mode when you've been in a place where potentially you have been trying to make yourself smaller, whether that be thinner, leaner, or whatever it is. I think a lot of women run into that issue, men too. I don't want to exclude you guys from the conversation. Experience is mostly around training women. I have trained men, but my specialty is definitely with women. And of course, I'm a woman, so it makes a lot of sense for me to know more about what has worked well for me and what hasn't, what mistakes I have made, what things I have corrected. And and bodybuilding has helped me a lot to realize that my plan while I'm in a deficit for exercise and eating is obviously way different than a plan where I am not. When you're in a cut, you're focusing on muscle maintenance and, of course, eating the required calories to stay in a deficit. And when you're in a deficit, it is impossible or very challenging gain muscle. The only reason I could see that working out for someone is if they're a beginner and haven't actually a true program before. And a beginner would be someone, to me, who has less than 6 months of consistency. Glutes are a large muscle group, the largest muscle group actually. And to grow them, you need enough weekly hard sets plus a mild surplus, or at least maintenance with high protein. One will build a noticeably bigger butt without being in a surplus, and if they are chronically under eating. Your body has more things to prioritize than a fat, juicy ass. So it's definitely not going to prioritize it if you're in a chronic deficit. Them once per week with random exercises is not a plan, and it is not enough. And they respond best to 2 to 3 focus sessions per week with progressive overload. Okay. And then for the nutrition fixes, you want to set your calories about 200 to 500 calories above maintenance for a dedicated glute building phase lasting at least 12 weeks, so about 3 months, ideally up to 6 months if you genuinely want noticeable growth. And so anchor each meal around 40 grams of protein from lean sources, meat, eggs, dairy, soy, legumes, whatever your jam is. And that will help support protein synthesis across the day and match your nutrition to your training goal. So if you desperately want glute gains, accept a small surplus and gradually scale to increase as a part of the process, rather than trying to stay diet lean year round. If you go through a little building phase and then you can cut back, if you feel uncomfortable with that amount of time, you could always do 8 weeks, do a 4-week maintenance block, and then do another 8 weeks, or whatever makes you comfortable. This is where a coach guiding you can be helpful if you have some around food that you feel like it's difficult to sort through yourself. If you are ready to blast off and you really are determined to make those glute gains, sometimes that motivation and then actually immersing yourself in it and realizing you're not getting that fat, actually it's going to the right places, is really helpful. But you can't stay in a deficit. It's just not going to work. And if you're not tracking your food, then you're way behind the curve. If you're not tracking and you have some really solid goals, you definitely want to track, at least so that you know what needs to change if you don't do it chronically. But the easiest way, I always explain tracking your food like a GPS. The easiest way to get to where you're going is to use the GPS. It's going to take you right there. Just like tracking your food, you're going to know exactly what's going in, exactly what you're having to eat to get to your goal, and when you're going to get to your goal, because it is just a science. Yes, there's some nuance because of the body being an amazing, but for the most part, it's calories in versus calories out. If you're not tracking your variables, it's going to be really difficult. And it's not that you can't get there without tracking. Back to the GPS, you can definitely get to where you're going without the GPS, but you're going to take a few wrong turns. You're going to have to go back to where you started a couple times, and you're going to feel like you're getting nowhere. Then you always can come back to the GPS, and similar with the GPS analogy, once you kind of know where you're going, you don't have to use the GPS anymore, so you can kind of off tracking a little bit. Then when you start to see maybe it's been a while since you've been there, or you're just not really sure what's going on, maybe there's some detours, then you can definitely pick tracking up again to get yourself back on track. But it is an extremely useful tool that just makes it more convenient. So you can do the guessing game if you want by liking it. I often see if someone has pretty strict goals, that is one of the main pieces holding themselves back. And so just keep that in mind. It doesn't have to be exactly what I suggest, but it is very helpful for clear direction and clear data to go off of. But for the frequency and recovery fixes, you want to train your glutes at least 2 to 3 times per week with at least, I would even venture to say, like to 20 hard sets total across the sessions, depending on experience and recovery. I fall towards the higher end of that because I've been doing them for so long, but if you're newer, you can probably get away with that lower minimal dose, which is perfect. You want to build up, but don't hammer glutes hard on consecutive days. Allow at least 48 hours between heavy sessions for recovery while still keeping overall weekly volume high. So support recovery with adequate sleep and rest days, and avoid turning every other day into heavy leg work. Just drain you and your recovery budget. So, as promised, I do have a practical 12-week glute growth blueprint, which I will put here on the screen. And so it's just going to be I have 2 days for sure if you are a beginner, and there's an optional third day that I will post here. And for progression rules, you want to every week aim to beat last week on at least one main lift, either adding 1 to 2 reps at the same load or adding a small amount of weight at the same time or at the same reps. And then if a set feels easy with more than 3 repetitions in reserve, increase the load for the next session. And if your technique breaks down, hold load and focus on execution before pushing heavier. So log every session so you can see objective progress, not just feeling the burn. Muscle grows from progressively higher tension over time, not vibes. Get that in your head. But other than that, I really appreciate you guys in, and I'm back to business. I kind of fell off a little bit. I am struggling with my mental health, so I'm good, I'm safe. I am just having a lot of about myself, my own journey, what I want to do, where I want to go next. YouTube just took a little bit of a back seat, but I am motivated to continue providing some good resources for those who find it helpful, and I enjoy making these, and so I'm trying to find some more enjoyment in life again. And yeah, thank you guys, and I hope this was helpful.